Let's talk about what Putin wants. Let's get into that a little bit because I find this fascinating. Everybody has an opinion on what's going on in the Ukraine, right? Everybody has something that they think is behind all of this. I mean, some of the stuff is pretty simple, right? If you look at it from just a general scenario, what does Putin want? Well, the easy answer is, Putin wants his Soviet Union back. He wants what once was. Now, whether or not that will ever be again, that remains to be seen. But he wants Ukraine. He desires Ukraine. He would love to have Ukraine under his belt. And it looks like he will. It looks like he certainly will. Even though the folks in Ukraine are fighting. They are putting up a hell of a fight, as a matter of fact. And they're, swinging it out with this big, bad Russian army in the streets, in the outskirts of towns. Again, they're fighting the best fight that they can. You heard about the heroes that died on Snake Island, who basically told Putin and his entire crew to F off. Just a remarkable story. But the fight is going on. But the question is, how far will the fighting go? And when, because it's an eventual when, will Ukraine fall? Because Ukraine's not going to get any help. The United States is not going to come rushing in. United Nations aren't coming rushing in. NATO's not coming in. Nobody's coming in. It's Ukraine against Russia. It's a mismatch of biblical proportions. Now, Ukraine will put a hurt on them. They already have put a hurt on them to a certain extent. And it will make Putin sore. He'll not really walk away with this unscathed. But in the end, he will have his Ukraine. And what will the reaction be from the rest of us? How will we look upon Russia once Ukraine is under their control? And the other part of this is, how is he going to control it? Is he going to keep occupying forces in there? Is he going to decapitate the government completely? Is he going to kill the president? Is he going to execute him? I mean, he's come out and said that there are war crimes that need to be answered for, and pointing to the president of Ukraine as somebody who is going to feel the sharp edge of his sword. But even bigger than this, even bigger than Ukraine, I mean, is it a legacy that Vladimir Putin is looking to cement? Here's a man who has $70 billion with a B dollars, $70 billion. And he has said this before, and I've said this before. One of the things that bothers him most, he says one of the biggest catastrophes in Russian history is the fact that, or geopolitical catastrophes, is the fact that the Soviet Union broke apart and a lot of this land was lost. And that lives with him every day. That nags him every day. And he believes that Russians are Ukrainians. Ukrainians are Russian. So what he's doing, from his point of view, is very different than the way we see it. He's looking to reunite something that was lost. I do believe that to a certain extent. I believe there's some of that there. I think that he looks at the West and says, stay the hell out of here because these are my people. Even though when they actually did cast a vote as to whether or not to pull away from Russia, it was like a 90% vote that they wanted to be their own free nation. But still, Putin looks at it a little bit differently. And he's sort of reclaiming land that he feels like is theirs. So when this is all done, part one of this is all done, what will happen next? Because that's what everybody's worried about. If you listen to the news stories, that's what everybody's saying. They're all saying the same thing. What's going to happen next? Nobody's really looking at now. They are, but they're not really looking at now. It's a foregone conclusion Ukraine is going to fall. And they're looking at it, well, what happens after? Is he going to continue on? Is he going to make this Hitler-esque move across Europe? They didn't think so back in the beginnings of World War II. Why would they think he's going to continue to do that now? History, again, is it repeating itself, or is this a one-time sort of move from Putin? Well, if you look at it as, let's say, a one-time move, if it's a one-time move, he takes this country that he covets and doesn't do anything else, occupies it, pulls his troop back, does what he needs to do to claim it and keep it, the rest of the world will forget about this, just like they forgot about Crimea. And if he does that, well, Putin will have a win. But it's a small win in the grand scheme of things. So that's looking at it maybe from a short-sighted perspective. If you look at it from a more sinister angle, and you can look at this from a very sinister angle, the question that I've been asking for the better part of 2 weeks since the buildup has begun is, has Putin conspired with China? Have they sat across from each other in some secret meeting? And as Putin said, listen, here's what I'm going to do. When your Olympics are over, I'm going to, again, position my forces to take back a country that's rightfully mine. And when I'm completed with that, or in the midst of the completion of that, you're going to get a chance to go after something you covet, which is Taiwan. And in conjunction, if they've come up with this kind of a sinister plan, how diabolical it would be, and how potentially successful for both countries if they were working in some kind of a concerted effort to bring both of these wants to bear. And if Putin gets his Ukraine and China then goes after Taiwan, and we've got an inept dope who is the current resident at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and can't walk and chew gum at the same time, you've got this option, this opening, this advantage. You know, advantage goes to China, advantage goes to Russia. So what happens in that setting? What happens if that happens? And it's not that impossible. So let's really quickly assume, because I'm running out of time here for this break, but let's assume that Putin gets his Ukraine. China goes after Taiwan and panic ensues in the Pacific Rim. And now you've got war on two fronts. And in a carefully calculated plan between China and Russia, and this is not something that's a insane, crazy person's dream. It's right here at our doorstep right now. But if in some kind of a conspiratorial act, an alliance between the two other superpowers other than ourselves, and China decides to go after Taiwan, and Russia, with complete occupation of Ukraine, decides, well, this isn't enough. Let me go a little bit further. Let me go into Poland. Let me go into some of these countries that are protected by NATO. And China causing a stir. And now Russia's got the entire world on their heels. But together they're working in unison. What happens then? What happens if on two fronts you've got two legitimate superpowers? Although China is obviously a more dangerous adversary than Russia. But if that happens, what happens to the delicate balance of peace on the planet? Putin's already made a reference that he might be willing to use tactical nuclear weapons to defend himself. Imagine the combination of Russian resources and the military manpower of China and what that could potentially do to the rest of the planet. And if you factor in the idea that they might be willing to use tactical nuclear weapons to thwart threats in different areas. Now, I know this is worst case scenario, but it's not out of some crazed imagination. It's right in front of us. It's right in front of us. If Putin's ambitions exceed the Ukraine and China's involved, that, ladies and gentlemen, is World War III. Period. End of story. It's not a long line of lists of things to get to that point. It's a short list. China's involved. Putin has ambitions besides Ukraine. That combination. And we're living through what your parents or your parents' parents have lived through, a world war. And if both of the adversaries are prepared to use weapons of mass destruction, I can make an argument that billions of people will die. All right, my name is Lee Elci. I hate to be the bearer of gloom and doom, but Gloom and doom is out and about. We'll take a quick break. We'll come right back. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the USA Radio Network, raw and unfiltered.